After the age of 40, many people notice something subtle but persistent. Loud environments feel more exhausting than they used to. Restaurants seem noisier. Shopping centers feel overwhelming. Group conversations become harder to follow. Background chatter that once faded away now demands attention. You may find yourself lowering the TV volume, avoiding crowded spaces, or preferring quiet evenings at home. At first, this can feel like a loss of tolerance. Some interpret it as becoming irritable, aging poorly, or losing social stamina. But what if this shift is not decline? What if it reflects nervous system recalibration? The human brain processes sound in multiple stages. Sound waves enter the ear, convert to electrical signals, travel to the auditory nerve, and are interpreted in the auditory cortex. But hearing is not just mechanical. It is neurological filtering. The brain constantly decides which sounds matter and which can be ignored. This filtering system depends heavily on cognitive load, stress level, and neural efficiency. In younger years, the brain often handles sensory input with greater flexibility. Novelty excites the dopamine system. Crowded environments stimulate curiosity. Noise blends into a stimulating background. But over time, several changes occur. The brain becomes less tolerant of excessive stimulation. This is not because it weakens. It is because it prioritizes efficiency. One major factor is sensory gating. Sensory gating refers to the brain's ability to filter irrelevant stimuli. As we age, the efficiency of sensory gating can shift. Instead of automatically suppressing background noise, the brain may process more of it consciously. This increases cognitive effort. A noisy restaurant that once felt energetic now requires more mental energy just to follow a conversation. Another factor is cumulative stress exposure. By midlife, most adults have experienced decades of chronic stress. Stress alters the amygdala and prefrontal cortex interaction. The nervous system becomes more vigilant. Hypervigilance increases sensitivity to unpredictable stimuli, including sudden noises. The nervous system after 40 often carries more stored stress than it did at 25. Sleep quality also influences sensory tolerance. Lighter sleep reduces neural recovery. When the brain is slightly fatigued, it struggles to filter background input efficiently. This creates the subjective experience of everything feels louder. Hormonal changes further influence sensitivity. In women, estrogen fluctuations during perimenopause affect neurotransmitter balance. Estrogen interacts with serotonin and dopamine systems, both of which regulate mood and sensory processing. In men, gradual testosterone reduction influences stress tolerance and energy regulation. These shifts can subtly lower overstimulation thresholds. Hearing mechanics themselves also change. Tiny hair cells in the inner ear gradually lose sensitivity to certain frequencies. When high-frequency perception declines, the brain compensates by increasing overall auditory gain. This can make certain environments feel sharper or harsher. But noise sensitivity is not purely auditory. It is neurological. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for attention regulation, becomes more selective with age. It invests energy where it perceives value. Unnecessary stimulation feels intrusive rather than exciting. Midlife also brings greater awareness of internal state. In youth, internal discomfort may be overridden by social drive. After 40, internal signals are harder to ignore. Fatigue, overstimulation, and irritability become more noticeable. Another overlooked factor is digital exposure. Constant notifications, scrolling, multitasking, and screen-based stimulation overload the sensory system daily. The nervous system becomes chronically activated. In this state, additional noise feels overwhelming because baseline stimulation is already high. Importantly, increased noise sensitivity does not automatically indicate hearing loss or neurological disease. In many cases, it reflects a mature nervous system prioritizing depth over chaos. The question becomes, how do you work with this shift rather than fight it? Understanding that midlife noise sensitivity often reflects accumulated nervous system load rather than fragility changes how you respond to it. Instead of forcing yourself to toughen up, the more effective strategy is recalibration. The nervous system operates like a bandwidth system. When baseline stimulation is low, it can tolerate sudden input without overload. But when baseline stimulation is already high, due to digital exposure, chronic stress, caffeine, multitasking, and constant background media, any additional noise feels intrusive. After 40, the system becomes less forgiving of chronic overload. The first strategic adjustment is lowering baseline input. Many adults live with continuous background sound, television running, podcasts playing, notifications buzzing, music in the car, noise during meals. These microstimulations keep the sympathetic nervous system mildly activated. The body never fully resets. Creating intentional silent windows during the day allows the nervous system to downshift. Silence is not empty. It is regulatory. When external stimulation decreases, internal rhythms stabilize. Heart rate variability improves. Cortisol levels decline. Auditory processing centers reduce gain amplification. Over weeks, this reduces hypersensitivity. Second, protect sleep architecture with precision. Sleep is when sensory processing centers recalibrate. During deep sleep, synaptic pruning occurs. Excess neural noise is cleared. If sleep becomes fragmented, as it often does after 40, this pruning becomes less efficient. The result is increased daytime sensitivity. Protecting a consistent sleep schedule, reducing evening light exposure, and limiting alcohol significantly improves auditory tolerance. Third, regulate caffeine intake. Many midlife adults rely on caffeine for energy stabilization. However, caffeine increases cortical excitability. In a system already sensitized by stress, high caffeine intake amplifies startle response and sensory irritability. Reducing afternoon caffeine alone can decrease perceived noise intensity. Fourth, address stress physiology directly. Chronic cortisol elevation increases amygdala reactivity. The amygdala scans for unpredictability, including sudden sound shifts. When cortisol remains elevated, background noise feels threatening rather than neutral. Structured breathing, slow nasal inhale, extended exhale activates the vagus nerve, lowering sympathetic tone. Practice daily. This changes baseline reactivity. Fifth, strengthen attentional control. Focused training rebuilds sensory gating efficiency. Exercises that demand sustained attention, reading without distraction, puzzle solving, learning complex skills, strengthen prefrontal regulation over sensory input. Over time, the brain becomes better at suppressing irrelevant stimuli. 6. Evaluate environmental design. Many overstimulating environments combine hard surfaces, echo, and high-frequency reflections. Choosing seating near walls, wearing subtle ear-dampening plugs in crowded spaces, or selecting quieter meeting times reduces unnecessary load without isolating socially. Seventh, increase exposure gradually rather than avoiding completely. Total avoidance increases sensitivity. Controlled exposure builds tolerance. Short visits to moderately stimulating environments followed by decompression periods retrain resilience. Eighth, address hearing mechanics realistically. Early-stage high-frequency hearing loss can increase listening effort. When speech comprehension requires more cognitive work, fatigue increases. A hearing assessment does not imply weakness. It provides clarity. Even subtle amplification tools reduce mental strain. Ninth, consider inflammation and metabolic state. Systemic inflammation heightens neural excitability. Blood sugar instability increases irritability. Stabilizing glucose through balanced meals reduces neurological volatility. Anti-inflammatory dietary patterns reduce sensory hypersensitivity. 10th, acknowledge emotional refinement. With age comes decreased tolerance for chaos, not only auditory chaos, but social and emotional chaos. What once felt stimulating may now feel draining because your value system has shifted. This is maturity, not decline. Midlife nervous systems often prioritize predictability and depth. Sudden noise, chaotic environments, and multitasking conflict with this priority. Rather than forcing yourself to conform to earlier patterns, aligning lifestyle with neurological preference creates stability. Recovery becomes essential. After intense sensory exposure, deliberate decompression prevents cumulative overload. A quiet walk, dim lighting, minimal conversation, these are not antisocial behaviors. They are neurological resets. It is also important to distinguish between sensitivity and fragility. Sensitivity means responsiveness. Fragility implies weakness. Many midlife adults are more emotionally stable, more cognitively clear, and more self-aware than ever before. Increased noise sensitivity often coexists with improved judgment and self-regulation. The nervous system after 40 becomes more honest. It signals overload faster. It communicates boundaries more clearly. Ignoring these signals leads to chronic fatigue. Respecting them leads to sustainable energy. Rather than asking, why am I becoming intolerant? Consider asking, what is my system protecting? Often, it is protecting attention, emotional bandwidth, and cognitive depth. A quieter life does not mean a smaller life. It means a curated one. Over time, when baseline stress decreases, sleep improves, inflammation reduces, and attention strengthens, noise sensitivity often moderates naturally. The system recalibrates. Midlife is not the beginning of fragility. It is the beginning of selectivity.